And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I am the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and we are on the podcast today, leveraging thought leadership. Today, my guest is Gregg Stebben. Say hello, Gregg.
Hey.
And let me give you Gregg's background real quick. So Gregg is the co-host of the nationally syndicated ForbesBooks Radio broadcast, which is in over 200 U.S. radio markets, and a podcast at ForbesBooks.com. He's the author of 17 books. I know a lot of people haven't read 17 books, so that's impressive, which includes White House Confidential and Internet Privacy for Dummies. He's a columnist, and he's worked for some of the biggest magazines, including Men's Health, Bon Appetit, TV Guide, remember that? And Spy.
Did you just age me or what? TV Guide and Spy. Wow. I must have gray hair or something. Oh, I do have gray hair.
Welcome to the club. So you've had the privilege of interviewing world leaders, celebrities, thought leaders, and Nobel laureates. I had the pleasure of meeting you at the beginning of this year down in Charleston at the Forbes Book Summit, which was an awesome event.
Yes.
And you and I met there. I was on your show, and now you're on mine. So it's sort of, you were one of my inspirations. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and joining us today.
It's great to be here. That's why I'm so nervous. Is we're going to have to compare like who did a better job, and I'm afraid I might lose. And I'm a very competitive guy.
Wow, competitive podcasting. Here we go. This is like nerds gone wild.
Yeah, this is the Olympics of podcasting here.
Exactly. Wow, the pressure is on. So let's see what my opening move is going to be here in like sort of curling or something. So you sit at an interesting focal point, if you will, right? So you spend a lot of your time as part of your job with Forbes Books, running ForbesBooks Radio, which is interviewing lots of authors and thought leaders on their expertise and such. So give me just sort of a quick sense of trends that you're seeing, things that people are doing from a thought leadership and content perspective that's interesting, innovative, creative, et cetera, in purpose of getting their work out to more folks more often.
Well, what's interesting is it's actually a really fascinating place to be sitting, because I'm interviewing, I'm sitting and I'm like at this apex, right, of exactly what you're interested in at Thought Leadership Leverage, and exactly what we're interested in at Forbes Books. I mean, what we want to do is find the best, the most compelling, the most exciting thought leaders in the world, frankly, and we want to show them how to write a book to use that. And I know that's a big part of what you do at Thought Leadership Leverage. But once you have a podcast, as I'm sure you're finding, then you get an opportunity to talk to people in a completely different way than I think has ever really existed in the world of business before. And I know that's a dramatic statement, but I think it's really true, because as I'm sure you're finding, and as I have found, because my interviewing experiences goes a long way back to before there was podcasting and before there was even an internet. And I discovered even at a young age that once I got someone on the phone and I started interviewing them, they would tell me things. I mean, Vincent Price decided he needed to tell me how he lost his virginity.
Well, I'm not going to. No, I'm taking a note of interesting interview questions.
No, I did not ask.
Was it a horror story?
I did not ask. No, that's a good comeback. But I mean, it's just, so I actually think podcasting is one of the most exciting and smart things businesses can do today, because what people do when you interview them, first of all, they're flattered to be invited, just as I am now.
Right.
And then it's like we all know that when it's about me, that's when I like it best. But now it's about me with spotlights, right? Like it's real about me, not fake about me.
So let me unpack some of that. So there's obviously sort of two sides to podcasting. So podcasting is not a new phenomenon, but it's relatively new as medium go.
Yes.
One of the reasons we launched ours is I'd been a guest on a bunch of them, and I sort of like it. So I'm lazy, meaning I'm not a great writer. It's work for me to get blogs out. They tend to be okay, broadly speaking, but I have more fun just sitting around talking to people. So then I started to be guest on podcasts. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I don't have to do a lot of prep. I do some. It comes naturally to me. conversation. You never know where it's going to go. It's not scripted, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, okay, great, let's launch one. So, you're seeing it from both sides, Greg. Being a guest is one way to leverage your thought leadership and get stuff out there. And then ultimately hosting a podcast is another way to get it out there. So,
well, and I think people are going to begin to discover, and I mean, this is really part of what we're doing at Forbes Books is, first of all, what Forbes Books is ultimately in the authority business. And we use books as a way of building your authority. You have to have authority to build authority, and you certainly have to have authority or be an expert or a thought leader to write a book, because if you don't have some authority, then that's a lot of empty pages. You take it from a guy who's written a lot of books. I mean, they don't just magically show up there. I think podcasting is yet another way to exercise it. And you pointed to one of the real benefits of it, frankly, is that if you are an authority at something and you begin to think about something like podcasting as another tool in your toolbox, or, what is an arrow in your quiver, or however you want to say it, if you are already an authority, one of the things that's going to happen if you are the host of a podcast is that you're going to attract people that otherwise maybe you couldn't have reached, or maybe you could have reached them easily, but you wouldn't have reached them.
That's an amazing point, because we do a lot of work with our clients to help them get their content and their work out on social media. So, for example, everybody has, in my opinion, sort of a content preference, right? So if you're inherently a writer, words are your thing. If you're not a writer, it might be video. People are consuming content in all sorts of interesting ways today, right? It's they're sitting at in front of a screen, but they're controlling what and when. Back in the old days of when I was growing up and when you were growing up, Greg, 8:00 on Tuesday, you had three choices, maybe four.
Yeah, that's right.
Right now, it's
That's
at any time, day or night, I have a choice. I know the guy or the gal next to me at the gym, they've got pods on or whatever. They might be listening to a TED Talk. They might be listening to music. They might be listening to a podcast. So if you're not in the podcast game for some reason, you're missing a potential subset of your market as a way to connect to them, because it doesn't matter what you like, right? If you're not into listening to podcasts, or it just doesn't meet your, do it for you, great, that's fine. But there's a big chunk of the world out there that does. And why exclude yourself from that? Meet them where they are. And as a marketer, I'm always a big advocate of that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that from a format perspective.
Well, and one of the things we're doing at Forbes Books is we recognize the value of this in a lot of ways that I think are frankly completely new within the podcasting space. So the first thing I say, and I said, and I want to say it again just to reinforce it, is think about the person in your industry or your world that you have never been able to successfully connect with. They're too busy. They're out of reach for you. One way to reach that person might be, and this is kind of a long game, frankly, but might be to build a successful podcast within your industry. If I understand thought leadership leverage, you understand the value of playing in your niche, and so do we at Forbes Books. Build a successful podcast within your niche. Leverage your friends and your colleagues and your professional associates in your thought leadership position. And then once you've built something there, I mean, you've been doing this for how long, and how many interviews do you have in the can?
So we just started this ultimately as an experiment. I think we started about a month ago. I've got a dozen or 14 in the can, and we've published.
So in a month, you have a dozen or 14 interviews in the can. Yep. So we're talking about, imagine you had a specific target in mind in your industry. And this doesn't really apply to you per se, but imagine you're in the financial services or the fertilizer business, whatever it is, whatever your niche is. Hopefully, you know very specifically what your niche is, so you know who you need to reach. Go get those 14 interviews with some of your friends who have good marquee value, who are frankly, and this is the important part, flattered to be talking to you because you have a podcast and they don't.
Or even it might be that they do, and their podcast reaches their audience, and now you're exposing them to yours.
You're cross-pollinating. I mean, either way, I mean, it's the same principle, right? But put in the legwork to do what you've done, Peter.
Yep.
And then at the appropriate time, use your podcast. Don't call the person you want to have the you want to make the pitch to or make the sales call to and say, can I get an appointment to give you the pitch or the sales call? You have your
Exactly.
producer call and say, oh, we'd like to interview you on the Thought Leadership Leverage podcast.
Exactly.
And it's a completely different conversation. And then when that person gets on your podcast and is being interviewed by you, they're going to tell you all kinds of things they wouldn't have told you in a sales call, because it's not a sales call, it's an interview. And they want the world to know the stuff that's most important to them, which is also just coincidentally what you want to hear.
Great advice. So let me drill down onto a couple of things you touched on earlier. So at Forbes, you focus on authority marketing, and we could debate, is that different than content marketing or thought leadership marketing? It's in the same sort of wheelhouse, if you will, in terms of.
Yeah, I don't even want to have that debate. You can have that debate with somebody else. I'm not the guy.
My point wasn't the debate, but it's basically taking folks with deep expertise and helping them get to a wider platform and leveraging their content and their IP. Forbes is is nothing short of a stellar brand, right? So they've been around, and I was fortunate, like I said, to meet you down at the Forbes author event, and Steve Forbes was there. It's pretty impressive. On behalf, well, I don't know if I can have to speak on behalf of Forbes, but you're probably getting more people asking you to publish with you than you'll accept. So how would I, as a budding author, speaker, thought leader, position myself now so that when the time is right for me to write the book, and I wanted to be part of a Forbes imprint because of the brand cachet, et cetera, to separate sort of the signal from the noise? What do I do to make myself attractive to you? That sounds like an odd thing after you mentioned Vincent Price's virginity, but from a content
I have
perspective.
lots of stories like that too. So if we get bored, I'm just going to name drop, Stephen King and Elizabeth Taylor, because that's what I used to do, was interview people. I still interview people. I used to interview.
And we can take a 5-second moment of silence in memory of each of our loss of virginity, but I think we'll not do that.
Let's save that for another podcast, or maybe an Anderson Cooper, Stormy Daniels interview or something. But that's a whole other conversation. So here's the thing that I think is fascinating about what we're doing at Forbes Books, and I think it's really important to recognize. The first thing is really to answer your question. Forbes Books is not the same thing as Penguin Books. So I've been published by Penguin Books. I've been published by Harper. I've been published by most of the biggest publishers in New York. I love the Forbes Books model better, a lot better. And I'll tell you why. Because unless you're already a rock star, when you publish a book the traditional way, the conversation goes something like this. Let's publish a book. Oh, here's a book. Okay, we published the book. Did you notice anything missing in that conversation? I'll tell you what's missing, because it's driven me crazy 17 times. The conversation should go like this. How are we going to sell the book?
Right.
What's the business goal of the book? That conversation doesn't happen unless you're already John Grisham or Seth Godin.
When I say all the time,
the publisher doesn't have
it's the one business where if you and I decided we're going to open a bakery, the first thing we'd figure out before we put our money on the table, our time and energy in, is how many donuts do you think we can sell in a day? Or do we need to sell in a day to stay alive?
And then we know how much flour to buy, and we know how many employees to hire. And so I have a friend who at one time was the fastest growing small book publisher in New York. He would still have that title, except he outgrew small publisher. I mean, his company is hugely successful in the world of book publishing. It's not Forbes Books. It's a traditional publisher. And every time I see him, and I've had his company publish books. I've published books with him. But I tease him every time I see him. Very good friend of mine. I always say, you are in the craziest business in the world, because you produce a product that has 50,000 individual parts that have to be put in order in exactly the correct way. And you don't even know how many people want the product.
So tell me tell me what is it that I need to do? So if Forbes Books use the analogy of the Olympics, and I'm a decent, pick a sport, skier, what do I need to do to get into Forbes /Olympic shape so that at that point in time, I've got what Forbes is looking for. Because, I think there's a misperception in the world that, oh, I've got this brilliant idea and I'll just go shop it to all the publishers and they'll fight over me. Like you said, unless your name's Godin or Grisham or
Yes.
you're running for president or something like that, ain't going to happen in this lifetime.
Or Winick.
Yeah.
Let's not forget about Winick. He's got a great name too. So the point I was trying to make here is that for Forbes Books, we want to publish books by people who are thought leaders and have an idea, or are at least open to the idea of how they're going to successfully market their book, and it's probably not becoming a New York Times bestseller because you're probably in a niche.
So let me pause you and unpack that. So what you said there is remarkable on a couple of levels. And number one, you've got to be a thought leader. So to me, that means you've got to have amazing content. You've got to have something to say. You have to be able to say in a different way. It's got to be thoughtful, however we want to define that. And that's where most people stop. Where you move to, which is where I rarely hear folks talk about as they're moving into the space as content experts, and you've thought about how to market it and drive it, et cetera, not at the New York Times bestseller list level. Because the New York Times bestseller list, that nobody doesn't want that. But all that really means from an algorithm perspective is you figured out how to sell somewhere between 10 and 13,000 books during the course of the week, distributed over all the channels, blah, 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 blah. And there are more New York Times bestsellers today than ever before because everybody knows how to sort of play that game. You're looking for a book that is a product that has a lifespan beyond the 10 days you tried to jig the list or something. Is that correct?
Well, and it might be that, so let's be really realistic about this. Your reason for writing this book should be that remember what I said, authority marketing, authority branding. Your reason for writing your book, I'm speaking kind of generally here. I mean, there's room for variation, but the big idea is your reason for writing the book is that it's going to elevate you in the eyes of a certain group of people. And that elevation is going to bring you more speaking gigs, a higher price on speaking gigs, whatever it is. It's that elevation.
So you've got to have a market
to a specific, a specific population.
And you've got to have a vision around what success looks like. So basically what you're saying is, as a result of publishing this book and it being successful, I will do X to Y, right? Y is the specific target market, raise my fee, attract more clients, be able to speak more, whatever the case may be. And that's not a place of people that a lot of folks spend a lot of time because they're so deep in their expertise and they're so deep in their content. And I'm not advocating lighten up on that because that's just, unfortunately, table stakes. You got to do that. But that in and of itself is going to lead you to be, the Lake Wobegon reality of averages, right? The average business book sells, I think it's 2,000 units. That's not a lot. So anyway, what else should I be doing, Greg, to get ready?
Well, because this is specifically answers that question, because Forbes Books is unique from other publishers in another way, in that this is really important. Maybe you're almost a thought leader. Maybe you're aspirationally a thought leader, but you're not there yet. One of the things coming to Forbes and talking about a book, and hopefully for you, eventually publishing a book with Forbes, is we're marketers who publish. So maybe you don't know what the marketing plan is, but you know there should be one. You let us talk about you, your industry, your expertise, your aspirations, where you want to go. We've done this a few thousand times. We might be able to help you see where the marketing opportunity is, and we might be able to execute it as well. And the reason I brought up the aspirational thought leader is this. Maybe you're trying to figure out your place in the ecosystem. You've got a great position. You're committed, but you're still working it out.
Sure.
I can tell you from the experience of writing 17 books that if you come to us with some of the pieces and we can help you put the rest of the pieces together and you start writing a book with us, in the process of writing the book, you are going to become the smartest guy in the industry. because writing a book forces you to learn stuff and think about stuff and work stuff out and talk to people that those conversations and thoughts and collections of things in your head never would have come together if you hadn't been forced to put it all together to produce that book. So this is rocket fuel.
and it's as you said, it's a forcing mechanism with timelines and deadlines and others holding you accountable. So let me sort of flip this the other way. So I'm out there, and again, I think many of the things that you're talking about are relevant to folks whether they're with Forbes books or not, right? So I don't want to make this
sure, of course, no, I mean everything I'm saying it applies to anybody. So yes.
So give me a sense of the things I should not do. Meaning, time, money, energy is limited. So what are the things that you see lots of folks do that are moving into this space that either have neutral or negative impact? So, there's a Bob Newhart video of just stop doing that. What's your stop doing that advice?
I think the biggest problem people make today, and when I say people, I mean people, individuals, sole proprietors, thought leaders, and even up to the organizational level, large organizations, is they don't commit. So I think if you're going to do a podcast and you tell people you're going to do a podcast, you better do a podcast. If you're going to use Facebook aggressively, you better use Facebook. You better have a blog if you're going to blog. I think one of the worst things you can do today is keep promising. First of all, it's a lack of focus on your part. It's terrible if you have people in your organization because they forget how to commit. But it also signals to the world.
Well, and how many times I know often for me when I'm talking to a potential client, I'll go and look at their stuff, look at their site, and I go on their blog, and the last post was August of 2014. It tells me something. You go on their Twitter account, and you can see sort of then they moved to Twitter and they were tweeting 11 times a day, but haven't done that in 11 years. To me, I think you need to stick to it. At some point, if it's not reaping benefits, don't do it. But I think you need to stick to each of these activities longer than you would expect, because none of these are get rich quick things. None of these are paths to short-term success. So you're not going to blog 5 times and all of a sudden the sun, the moon, and the stars are just lining up so everything's perfect for you. You're not going to do 3 podcasts as a guest and the phone rings off the hook. It doesn't happen. I always tell, this is a long game. If you're looking to get rich quick, jump to Las Vegas and bet red or black or whatever. Good luck with that. Right. Put the energy in and the effort in and consistently do that. That's great. Give me in the minute or two that we've got left, give me 1 or 2 other tidbits of either things to start doing or to stop doing or do less of.
Well, I think along the lines of what we were talking about, I think before you jump into something, whether it be a book, a blog, a podcast, Twitter, whatever it is, the reason anyone can start something and then realize it's not valuable and stop. It's not that that's going to go away, but the level at which people stop and start is really the problem. And if you're stopping and starting things over and over again, to me, I would take that as a clear sign that either I didn't understand it to begin with, or I didn't have a plan for how it was going to be useful. And in today's world of social media, and social media is really about community, I think people forget that community means giving more than you take. And when I go to a company or a person's website and I see what you described as they blogged a few times, they tweeted a few times, they Instagrammed a few times, I think what happened was they never intended to give. They only intended to take, and there was nothing to take because they didn't give. And that's a fundamental flaw that needs to be addressed at a much higher level.
No, and I love sort of the spirit of content generosity. So as we close up, if people want to find out the punchline here of how Vincent Price lost his virginity, how do they contact you?
I don't remember, but I actually was just thinking about this over the weekend and thinking, I've got to go find that interview. I should start podcasting my old interviews. And so that may be a project for me.
Yeah, there's a hashtag in there somewhere. But okay, if you'd like to find that out, or more importantly,
if you want to know how I lost my virginity, I will be happy to share that.
There you go. Or if you want to get in touch with Gregg and find out about Forbes books, what's the best way to do that, Gregg?
Yeah, come find us at forbesbooks.com/radio. And by the way, we're, just as the Forbes Books model is open to people who are looking at how to be a thought leader, the podcast has been a great way for us to meet those people too. So if you think you might be a good guest, come to the page, forbesbooks.com/radio, go to the bottom, hit the contact us button. And if we think it's a good fit, we'll invite you to come online and do an interview.
Well, that's great. I appreciate your time, your insights. You certainly have a great vantage point and perspective, and you've been on the author side of this, and then you spend your days working with authors and thought leaders. So lots to unpack here, and I appreciate your generosity of sharing and being here with us today. So thank you so much for your time, Gregg.
You bet, Peter. It's great to be here.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.